Oh, yeah, I'll just start by saying it's lovely to have you all here. Thanks for everybody who's joined so far. Um, Before we start, I just wanted to say the like no basically just be polite when asking questions later on, like throughout the panel. Um, yeah, and anybody who isn't will just be taken out of the meeting, pretty much. But yeah, Ina, if you want to like start by any like opening remarks, and then we can get to it.
Cool. Yeah. Well, hello everyone. I'm still kind of letting people in as we speak, probably, um, to give other people a bit more time. But generally, I'm very excited to open this panel, which has been very long in the making, actually, and it's been a lot of emails that Khadijah you've also been a part of. So it's very exciting to finally see it come into fruition. Um, the panel in general is going to be about well, we have invited 5 visual artists, but it is more about celebrating perspectives in the creative industry, as well as just celebrating people who are working in the creative industry, doing fantastic works, which you'll hear and see in a minute. And I'm just very excited. I'm a personal fan of all 5 of them, so I'm very excited that you've all been able to give your time to us and tell us about your lives and your works. So thank you so much again, and thank you so much for Khadijah, who has helped organise a lot of this. And I'll turn my camera off now. But yeah, just a lot of thank yous to everyone.
Thank you, Ina. Yeah, like she summed it up pretty well. I'm really happy that all of you are here. We are waiting on one more person, but she'll be arriving soon, hopefully. But yeah, I'm very excited to speak to you guys and to like pick your brains. Um, yeah, so I'll ask you guys to introduce yourselves, just to the audience, as like more people come in. But yeah, Hussina, if you want to start, that'd be great.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on this panel. So a little bit about myself. My name is Hasina Raja. I am a multidisciplinary artist. I work with film, photography, installation, writing, and performance. A lot of my work is centered around identity politics and migration, journeying, diaspora, and my main focus at the moment is stories from the subcontinent, like so around South Asia, looking at partition and dual identity, thinking about second, third generation migrants that live in and amongst the West.
Cool. Thank you for that. Mahaneela, if you want to go next.
Yeah, sure. Hi, guys. My name is Mahaneela. I am a multidisciplinary artist. Also, my work takes form predominantly through film and photography, although I do dabble in lots of other things like DJing and all other kinds of things. But for me, my work really takes its shape around joy. Black and brown joy are really the main themes of what I do. I just try to provide more representation and add to the canon of photography and media that exists that shows us in modes of joy and happiness. That comes through in music videos that I direct, short films, documentaries. And at the moment, I am actually working on my first ever show, which I created with Nike. And it's all about Black women having conversations about issues that we care about. So really my work kind of, it just is all working in service of the same goal, but it just comes out in different ways.
That sounds amazing. Thank you. Antoinette?
Okay. Hi, I'm Antoinette. I'm from New York. I work as a visual artist. I started out painting and doing wood burning, and now I transitioned into more digital art. So I'm more of an illustrator now. And I guess my specialty right now are comic strips. Usually they have to do with everyday issues, mental health, and definitely a big focal point is race. I feel like everyone said something really good after. I blanked out, but it's good. It's good. Thanks, Khadijah.
It sounds good. It sounds great.
Thank you, Saba. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Saba, and I'm just so privileged to be on this panel today. I'm really excited. I work at NYU's campus in Abu Dhabi. I'm primarily a storyteller, so I experiment with short documentaries. And I've just had my debut novel released by Bloomsbury called Skyfall. And I guess the themes that I touch upon are very similar to what other people have spoken about. But I was born and brought up in Karachi in Pakistan. And so, what I'm particularly interested through my films and through my fiction writing, and then kind of more journalistic pieces, are social movements coming out of South Asia and talk around politics and Islam, Islamophobia, but also transnational feminism. So, what I'm currently working on is a short 4-part series. It's a web series that is based on Me Too stories from South Asia, from India, Pakistan, and Nepal. They're college student survivors of sexual harassment. And so I'm interested in exploring that outside of a Western context. And I'm also very interested in looking at issues of radicalization and stereotyping in places like Afghanistan and Pakistan. So yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Side note, Saba is a New College alumna, for anyone who didn't know, but it's great to have you back. I'll get right into it. So the first kind of theme or topic I have is your inspirations and your creative processes. So firstly, where do you get your inspiration from? Where do you get your ideas from? And what inspires you? Yes, I'll go in the same order. So Hasina, you might want some time to think about it maybe.
Oh, I got all the big questions first, guys. When I think, this is funny, this is a question I ask myself a lot, because I actually started out studying humanities and law, and then realized it is so dry that I don't want to do it. I like the humanities side of things, but I didn't want to work for the CPS, and I didn't want to work in any way for the criminal justice system. So I ended up working as an actress and did that for a while, and realized that there's a glass ceiling you hit, but also just the constant stereotyping in narratives and just pigeonholing and stuff. It got to the point where it affected me to such a point. I just felt that women of color, and particularly from my own experience, weren't in control of what was being put out about them and projected onto the rest of society. It was just this constant reinforcing of these tropes or ideas that women of color are very passive or aggressive or docile, etc. So when I started making my own work, I have to say my inspiration definitely comes from my background. I have a huge sense of pride in my South Asian culture, of being a person of color, and my parents. I would say my parents are definitely a huge inspiration for me. Their resilience, their strength, their dedication, their commitment, their stories, their journeys have definitely spurred the way for me to make the work that I do. It's my own kind of cathartic way of kind of processing who I am and my identity in this space that is very British. But I am British, but I'll never be English, and I take a huge sense of pride in not calling myself English as well. And also the community groups that I work with. So a lot of my work is centered around youth work, or the queer community, or say the refugee or asylum seeker community. At the moment, it's the Bangladeshi community. And I gain a lot of strength and inspiration from the people that I work with. And I love collaborating with them. So that's where my work starts. It comes from a very personal place of experience.
That sounds fantastic. And I'm sure we can talk more about this maybe at the end or something. But yeah, Mahaneela, if you want to answer what inspires
you. I would say honestly, very similar inspirations for me is, a lot to do. I think it's kind of it's almost impossible to not as an artist be intertwined with your identity and have that sort of be a source of information, not information, inspiration for you, especially being, you know, first generation and having to navigate and process and understand where you are in the world and what place you're in at the many different intersections. So for myself, having South Asian background, also having West African background, Caribbean background, and being a woman, being a queer woman, I sit at many intersections. And so I've always been kind of constantly navigating that, growing up in a predominantly white area in the UK, never having, you know, a person of color teacher in my whole education, never having that kind of representation. So a lot of my learning and inspiration comes from self-research, you know, looking back at my culture, trying to find things that I can see myself reflected in. And I think when I came up short in that, that's what made me start creating those images myself, of my peers, my family, my friends, and just documenting. And that's really how things started for me. And now it's kind of evolved into, as I've evolved as an artist and as my skill set has grown, into just what other ways can I tell stories about people that are like me, you know? And that's really always my continuous evolution and inspiration.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Yeah, Antoinette, you can go.
I was mad inspired, both of y'all. Okay, I had to write mine down. Inspiration wise, things that annoy me, my dislike for others, spite. Yeah, that's usually what inspires me most. And then after that, because I feel like if it gets you riled up enough, you're gonna do something about it. And I enjoy complaining a lot. I feel like people who complain a lot live a lot longer. And if you don't get it all out, I feel like it's just gonna do something bad to you. So most of my experiences and things that annoy me definitely circulate in my mind. And then, you know, they rest there until they take form in like something I can visually see. And then the other thing is, out of things that I dislike, the lack of portrayal of, you know, people of color and Black women specifically in natural and normal environments. So for me, it was annoying where I couldn't see someone going to sleep, or like finding references to draw of like a Black woman asleep where she's not in lingerie, where you can find it for other people. And it's like, you know, they're in bed, they're wearing full clothes pajamas, but there's a racialization and sexualization and, you know, all these stereotypes projected onto us, that finding us in normal situations where eating, talking on the phone, I have to scroll forever and forever. And so it's like I have to make my own stock images for a lot of things. And so the lack of seeing people that look like me or my friends and not seeing them do regular stuff, that really bothered me. So especially when it has to do with mental health, things like your period or whatever it is that people go through on a regular, seeing people like me complain freely without being judged seemed, you know, unapproachable, unattainable. Like we were just supposed to stay, you know, a monolith. So that's definitely the things that inspired me the most, because it's like, if I can see someone snacking or gorging on food the way I like to gorge on food, like, you know, like it's not a sin, but I don't see it, you know? And so then my process is, usually I write a lot, and then I doodle with like little bubbles here and there to sketch things out. And then eventually I'll hear something or a phrasing someone uses, and I'll use that in dialogue for a comic strip that I'm writing. But yeah, it's a lot of drafting and drafting and drafting, especially when you want to be very concise, because my work requires for me to explain things in a simple way. And usually I do it in like one single frame. I don't do multi-panels. So, you know, it's a balance between sounding educated, but also making it easy enough for it to be recognizable. So that way I mean, people are going to argue regardless, whether they understand it or not, but to make things simple enough and still powerful enough, and at the same time use imagery of people I care about.
Yeah, that's it. That sounds really great. And it's nice to hear like how you go from an idea as well into like an actual piece that you can see. That was quite nice, thank you. Saba, what inspires you?
Yeah, well, I think at a philosophical level, I would say there's a couple of things, right? And then there's the more tactical kind of day-to-day inspiration. But I think there are two things that at a more abstract level inspire me. The first is, a lot of people have spoken about kind of identity and origin. And I think what's bothered me growing up in a place like South Asia is passport privilege or the lack thereof. And the fact that you grow up, and I say this with utter shame right now, but also candor, which is that you're at an airport and you're embarrassed of that green passport that you carry, and you're almost like, trying to conceal it or veil it somewhere, or kind of just agonizing over the fact that someone's going to pull you into some kind of room. And I think that's not mythical anymore. We all kind of either firsthand or anecdotally have a version of this where someone's been interrogated in some shape or form somewhere. And so I think that's the first thing that really bothers me, because as a girl growing up in Pakistan, I think I internalized a lot of that cookie cutter kind of caricaturing, which was to say, I think I learned to believe that the American dream was kind of what everyone should be vying for, and then I think that sense of shame that gets attached to your home country is hard to then get rid of. So I think the first thing that inspired me was, as I started kind of learning that critical thinking and questioning is a thing, I realized I want to kind of enroll in a school of unlearning if there is one, So I think that's the first thing. The other thing is that, again, kind of tied to my female identity as a woman of South Asian origin, I think we learn to self-censor a lot. There are things that even in a house with privilege, or so to speak, an educated household, people would speak of some of those things in whispers. And today I find that those things have inspired me and kind of made their way into my storytelling. One of those things would be like, say, talk of female sexuality. So with my novel, with Skyfall, female sexuality and kind of trying to normalize the rage around that is very front and center. So I think those are kind of the more philosophical things that inspire me. But then really, what is it that galvanizes you into action? How do you distill from that something a little more tactical, right? And I think that comes from like the most unexpected everyday interactions, right? Just tiny moments, experiences. Like I could be sitting talking to a complete stranger on a plane somewhere, and that's going to spark something in my head. Or obviously a newspaper headline, a photograph, I don't know, a dialogue that I've overheard, for example, that Antoinette was also talking about, which she uses for her comic strips, right? So I think my students at NYU, for example, or then again, when I go back home, like an obnoxious aunt will say something at like a wedding or a family gathering or something. And I'm like, oh my God, I need to take note of that. So I think it's those sorts of things that really make their way into my stories. But I also really liked what one of the other panelists said about evoking some kind of emotion. So be that rage, be that pathos, be that helplessness, shame, vulnerability, whatever. But just as long as it's something that I don't have a lukewarm reaction to, I think that's what really allows me to action that and kind of compels me enough to say, I want to tell this story. I think so that's kind of where the inspiration comes from.
Thank you. It's really interesting to see how you all take things that are like maybe hidden or like things that you don't see often enough, and you're like, I'll make it instead. So that's really nice to hear. Before we move on, I'll ask Phillippa to introduce herself. Hi, Phillippa. You can introduce yourself, like what you do, and then I ask the panelists what inspires them. How do they go from, like, where do they get their ideas from? So you can answer that as well.
Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. Sorry I'm late. Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to hearing all the ideas that are coming out and to hear from everyone. So I'm Phillippa Ndisi-Herrmann. I'm half Kenyan, half German. I live in London. I'm primarily a filmmaker. I do other things as well, but I'm primarily a filmmaker. My motivation is to transform audiences, to transform the viewer through making healing work that really makes us stop and think and reflect on our lives and the lives of others. And I've made the majority of my work is documentary essay and poetic as well, like poetic type, intimate films, intimate narratives. I tend to be quite inspired by nature and plants and trees and the sea, and in many ways I do want people to see the beauty of the world, and but also to witness other things that people are feeling, so that we can understand that we're all brothers and sisters. Yeah, so I would say my inspiration is, one of it is nature. One of them is nature. I'm very fascinated by childhood and children and family and transgenerational trauma and transgenerational healing, and memory as well. I'm very interested in memory, what we remember, what we hold on to, and for me that's kind of linked to identity and home, and breaking out of the molds that we've inherited. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but I think each generation is meant to move forward with what we're given, a bit like what Saba was saying. It's part of what I heard Saba saying when I came on.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's wonderful to hear. I think a couple of you like sort of answered this as well, but sort of when you have an idea, where do you go from there? So I think Antoinette and Saba, you touched on this. If you want to add to it as well, you're free to do that. But when you get an idea, what do you do with that? Like, where do you go from there?
Okay, so often the way I work is I tend to kind of work with it. I'm sure a lot of artists it's the same, but for me it's often an emotion that I feel. I feel something, and somehow I want to. Sometimes it's just an image that I see or a feeling, and I start to wonder what that is, and I kind of start to maybe write it down, and things slowly start attaching themselves to it. So maybe I want to. Yeah, like Khadijah, you said you watch Seeds. Yeah. So that was actually just an inspired poem that came 2 years before I made the film. And there was a poem that just came to me and I started writing it. And then after 2 years, I thought, okay, I'd like to make a film. And this poem doesn't just exist as it is, it needs to come to life. So I thought, let me attach some of the photographs I've taken to it. Maybe I can shoot some new video. So it's almost like different layers. I guess I approach my inspiration from different layers and start to attach things to it and see if the thing I'm attaching is adding to the conversation. And often it'll be a conversation that I wouldn't even, somehow the photograph will tell me something I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll ask you more about that later. There's a couple of really interesting things there. Hussina, if you want to answer that, so when you get an idea, where do you go from there?
When I get an idea, I think I have quite an immediate response to work and ideas, and sometimes I find what I do is I can put so much energy and so much time into it because I'm so fascinated by it. I'm so drawn into it, and then I have this issue where you kind of gas yourself out a little bit, and then I have to return to it. So it really depends also on the medium that I'm working with. So writing, for example, is something that I picked up in the last year and a bit because I feel that's a real process. I sit there, I get stuck, and I spend months and months and months away from it, and then I come back and then I go hard, and just all of this kind of pulls out. So I think a lot of my process is centered again around my own personal experiences, and I use the arts and whatever medium I work with as a form of expression, as a form of illustrating what I'm feeling. So with filmmaking and the visual stuff that I work with, I'm really blessed and I'm really lucky that in my socially engaged community work and practice with young people and community groups, they really inform a lot of what I want to talk about. If there's something socially or politically going on, that often spurs my desire to express myself and talk about it, because I don't have a huge presence on social media. I don't like the relationship between social media and mental health, and the fact that there's not much in terms of a conversation around that. And I think artists and so many brands and people have to use that tool as a way of marketing themselves. And I find I really self-censor myself on that kind of space. So therefore I don't engage with it. But I really do enjoy working with people. I need collaborators. That's how I work with. And collaborators don't necessarily have to be artists. And then I kind of use the topics and the themes that come about, particularly from communities that are marginalized, as much as I don't like that word either. It is about, in a way, giving voice to things that aren't voiced, or making sure certain topics and people are visible. And I try and do that in my own way through the people I work with. Hopefully that answers the question. But I think I'm still figuring it out, if I'm honest. I still think I'm figuring it out.
Yeah, that sounds good. Antoinette, you want to say something? Yeah.
What does it mean when you say gas yourself out?
So it's like, you think of like, do you know a whoopee cushion? You know what I mean, right? You know when you kind of just like let all of the air out of something. I think it's quite a London slang term of like letting all of the gas out of something, so you kind of exhaust it. You know, when you kind of go hard, like you're running or something, and you get so tired because you just put so much time into something.
So like a release.
Yeah, more a release that exhausts you, kind of.
That's a bit like a burnout,
like
maybe, I imagine, Hussina.
Say that again, please, Saba.
Do you mean something like maybe like a bit of a burnout?
Exactly. Actually, yeah, like a burnout. It's like working on an idea for too long that you kind of lose the passion for it, or you lose the enjoyment, and you just need some space and some time from it.
Okay, thank you.
I love the US UK translations. That's my everyday life being a Brit in New York. It's like constantly having to do that.
Yeah, Mahaneela, feel free to go ahead. Yeah, what do you do after you have your idea?
After the idea, you know what? My ideas don't really come just like one idea. It's really pieces of things that catch my eye over a long period of time. So I always just have like my notebook, and I just sort of make notes. Like it literally could be like I just see something cool, composition of like, even recently I was in the park and I saw these two men sitting on the grass, and the way they were sitting, they were perfectly aligned like this, and I just thought, wow, that's a cool shot. So I just write things like that, and then you never know, it might come to fruition like 2 years down the line in a music video, or it could be a photo composition for an editorial or something I'm shooting. So definitely I think my ideas come in piecemeal, but then once I have them, or once I have the kind of, I guess, script in my mind of like, and then this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen, usually it's all about collaboration for me. It's using my community of other artists as sounding boards for me, and going back and forth with them, and pacing up and down my room explaining the idea to a group of friends who are all just sitting there like, here we go again. But yeah, like I definitely lean into my community, into my partner who's also a creative person. Really, most people I'm around are very creative, so they definitely help me push my ideas to the edge and like help kind of build on them further. So I definitely think that's a big part of developing my process. Sometimes I just call people to just tell them an idea, like, so imagine this thing, like, and then it's, if it comes with more questions, I know that I've got a good one. You know, if it's okay, well, and how would this work, and how would that work? You know, I never take that as discouragement. I take that as encouragement, because it means that if there's curiosity about just the initial nugget of an idea, then that means we've got something to really build from, you know. So I always try and think of things like that, especially with collaboration. It's definitely been a process. I think in my younger, even though I'm not old, but in my younger years as an artist, it was definitely something that I took personally. You know, I found it really hard wanting to collaborate, but at the same time, finding it hard to hear people tell you, but what about this instead of that? Or I don't know if that really makes sense. It's Erykah Badu said it best, right? I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit. So it's really difficult to hear criticism or what you perceive to be criticism. But I think it's so important in the process of actually developing an idea is to collaborate. And the more I grow in my career, the more I get introduced to incredible other artists and contemporaries. And, with that comes this respect and this mutual trust. And I think that has been just so amazing for me in terms of like my creative process and allowing other people being like, you are actually amazing at what you do. So if you're telling me this, then I need to take that on board rather than take it personally or be defensive about it, because actually the idea suffers as a result. So I just kind of have transitioned into that, I guess having my ideas not completely be mine and being okay with that, and like being okay with once the initial thing is out in the world, letting it grow and in an organic way, in service of that idea. So yeah, that's kind of my process.
Well, that's really interesting. It's definitely a hard thing to get over what you perceive to be criticism and take it on board and just appreciate it and acknowledge it. Antoinette, if you want to add to what you said earlier, feel free. Yeah.
Okay, so I realized before I kind of glossed over my basic steps, and so I wrote it down, and it's more like to the point as to what I do, because I hate it when people do this, and I know it's because you're on the spot, and it's like, it just comes to me, and that's not how I feel it really works. Okay, so, it does come to you. There's like a topic that you come up with, and then you have to workshop, for me anyway, the lines that I'm going to use. And then the next thing for me is finding the photo references that I need to use for a said image. I spoke about it before, how it's kind of hard to find things with Black people in them already, in like body positions, etc. So a lot of times I actually have to Google white people in like a certain body position and then change their body, shift it slightly, replace the face into like, something I can see a Black person looking like, because I can't find any pictures of Black people doing the same thing. All right. Then usually I alternate between the body types I use. So if they're going to be fat, if they're going to be a little bit curvy or top heavy, I alternate between the ones that I've used last. And then skin tones, were they light skin this time? How many dark skinned people have I posted this month? And so from there, I decide the color palette I'm going to use when I'm actually, coloring in the piece. So do I want it to feel warm? Do I want it to feel cold? I do have a tendency to make the colors very like pastel color and cutesy, because the subject matter is going to be very harsh. And if it looks prettier, people are going to look at it more. That's it. That's what I have to
say. I really like how you're very, I guess, mechanical with like, oh, I'm making sure that I'm representing, like I'm displaying a diversity in my art. And you're very like active about that rather than, just choosing whatever you feel in the moment. But yeah, Saba, if you want to go ahead, if you want to add to anything that you said earlier about your creative process, you can do.
Yeah, I guess if I talk about, I think what Hussina said about writing really holds true for me too, which is that, so I guess what I'm trying to say is that a lot will depend, a lot of that transition from ideation to action will depend on the medium in which I'm telling the story. So if it's the novel, for example, a lot of what she said holds true, which is to say, it's not like you'll suddenly get it in like a month and the book is done, right? So you'll take periods away from it, and then you'll have these intense sort of writing boot campish sort of, I suppose, moments or weeks, and then draft after draft, and kind of just almost, I see it like sculpting a little bit, right? Like in the first one, it's like you're in a laboratory and throwing everything into the mix. And if I look at the first draft of Skyfall today compared to what's on the bookshelf, it's obviously markedly different because of the editing and the honing and all of that. But then talking about documentary filmmaking, I think for me, that's really interesting because it definitely depends on the subject matter. And so, for example, with Concrete Dreams, which is about street child footballers in Pakistan, That was very much about writing a grant proposal, submitting it to the Doha Film Institute, trying to get the funding first. I had like an entire treatment. Obviously, the film's again quite different from that because what I shot was different, but I still went in with some sense of the narrative arc. With Wounded Attachment, Songs of Survivors, the Me Too documentary series, that's completely different. It's something that just sort of came to me during lockdown last year. I got a little bit of funding for it. And again, it was interesting because a lot of times as a budding filmmaker, you get asked, what did you do during the pandemic? How did you stop? Was it productive? And so I'm not going to try and pretend like, yes, it was super productive, but I think there are workarounds. And again, I think that was because of the thematic subject material, which is to say, I could do these interviews over Zoom. I couldn't possibly prepare, a narrative treatment for what survivors are going to tell me about their harassment testimonies. I wouldn't want to. And so I think that was very much about, let's get online, let's get the interviews done, and then let's move to an edit table. And to post-production. So I think it really depends, but I'm definitely, as a filmmaker, I'm someone who's very much about, let's let the people tell their own stories as opposed to let me have it all written word to word and then try and shoot that. Because I feel like if I do that, then I'm shooting I go in looking for something, and I don't want to do that because then I might lose out some of the more surprising elements that emerge. And again, I also, there's always this politics of representation, again, which so many people have also touched upon earlier, which is to say, yes, I want us to reclaim our voices from South Asia, but I don't want to tell the story of a Me Too survivor. I still want it to very much be in their own voice. And I think that's the big idea behind trying to look at Me Too outside of America and Europe, which is to say, I don't need to save these people. I don't want to go in like a savior. So my process, I try and reflect that in the process to say, let's just get onto the sites where I want to shoot and spend time with these people and then let the camera do the magic. So I think that's what that process has been like.
Oh, that's really interesting. Phillippa, you did touch on this briefly, like your creative process. So yeah, I think I will move on. One thing I wanted to ask you guys about was like your journey into the creative industry, because I think for like BAME creatives especially, it's not always something that you think is like an option. Just like growing up, like maybe you have like expectations of like pursuing a particular career. um I will just go in order this time, like the order of people on my screen. So Hasina, if you want to start. Yeah, like what got you into the creative industry?
I'm going to simply put it as DIY, do it yourself. And what I mean by that is I didn't go to film school, I didn't go to art school. I went to university, studied criminology, as I said before, went to law school. And in that time, I worked for a lot of charities. And I started using the arts to kind of tackle, just for the groups that I was working with to talk about some of these issues. The most difficult thing about my journey is at the time that I started out as an actress, it's very hard to get your foot in the door if you don't have the contacts and you don't have the institution or the establishment to help you on that journey. So for example, the art schools, the film schools, or the drama schools, they're one way in. But actually what I found is the more I worked on the indie scene of working with emerging writers, emerging directors, working with these charities, and building my own network, that helped me to really focus in on what I wanted my trajectory to be. And for as long as possible, I thought it was wanting to be an actress until I realized actually I really don't gain much joy out of telling commercial stories, etc. For me, what I realized is I'm really interested in the story that isn't present. I'm really interested in creating work that makes me think about who I want to be in this space, in this world, because for so long a narrative is forced down your throat. Like for as long, I think someone once asked me, what would be the ideal role you want to play? And I was just like dumbfounded. I was like, I don't know. So my journey very much started from me doing it myself, applying for like artist bursaries, applying for small pots of funding, learning how to make work on a really shoestring budget, bringing in my friends who are also creatives and artists, collaborating with them. And the thing is, when you have an idea, or when I have an idea, I tend to turn towards people or friends or contacts or friends who I know that are interested in similar things. So the passion is there. And sometimes you find, I found that it's just me making the work, and then it was believing that the work I've made is suited to being shared with the public. And then that goes into just submitting to film festivals and reaching out to friends who are already doing it in that medium and getting guidance and advice. Like the main thing that I found was super useful, or although I still work as an actress, there is a lot of my work is very much in the film writing world now. And I found I could call on those contacts, I could call on those directors, I could call on those writers, I could call on those friends who are already kind of progressing in their field, and ask them for help. And help to look like mentoring, help look like information, help look like, you know, how did you get onto that scheme? Do you have any guidance for me? What would be your advice? And a lot of it was just sharing of information and knowledge. And that's really helped me on my journey. So if I could encourage anyone making or starting out making work, hopefully I'm not answering the question that's yet to come, but it would be make your own work and reach out amongst your own network.
That sounds, thank you. Thank you for that advice. Mahaneela, if, like your creative, like journey, your journey into the creative industry rather.
Wow, definitely been a very non-traditional journey as well, so very DIY. I started by doing just that. So I made my own magazine because I wanted to write and I wanted to take photos. So I didn't have any experience doing that. So I just decided to create my own thing. And it was called Cozy. At the time, I had actually dropped out of university, which is why I'm like, wow, I can't believe I'm actually here talking to university students as a dropout. I really, wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I knew that it needed to be something creative, and that was what felt right to me. So I got a job at an advertising agency doing an apprenticeship. So it was like right the very, very first step into one of those roles. But just that proximity to a creative industry started to open my eyes as to like what things you could even do. What is a graphic designer? What do they do? What's a creative director? What do they do? What's an account manager, etc., etc. And everything that I learned there would just apply to my own thing. What I was working on was very boring. It was things like Lidl and Tesco and like super, super boring stuff. But I was like, how can I apply this lesson of like, oh, I just like picked up a little bit how to, make a graphic for this boring brand. Now I can bring that knowledge on to applying it to my own thing, my magazine. It's about music, it's about cool stuff that I'm interested in. So Cozy, the magazine, really became my creative vessel and really a thing that I could use to express my creativity however I wanted. So as I grew and evolved, I started DJing, and then Cozy became like a event series. We started doing parties, and then it grew again as I started directing, and now it's a production company, and it's its own creative studio that I run. And it's been a really amazing way to be able to create those opportunities for myself, just by making my own thing. And every job that I had, I've just used it as an opportunity to kind of learn and absorb and take those lessons from the inside and apply them to my own thing. So after the agency, the next job I had was in another kind of agency, but it was more focused around like street art and graffiti artists, which was like totally not my thing. But at the same time, I was still working in service of my mission, which was like, I want to uplift artists. I want to like find a way to like work with artists. So whether they were the musical artist, which was my goal, or a graffiti artist, there were still lessons to be learned in that environment. And then Cozy grew to a point where people in the actual music industry knew what it was, and it was like a cool thing. And I ended up getting a job at a record label off the back of that, never having actually worked in the music industry before. So that was really cool. And that opened my world so much more as far as being in the actual creative industry every day, working with artists and musicians and actually getting to see how things worked on the inside. I would see music videos being commissioned and made, and then I think, well, actually I could do that. And then I would see like photos being taken for like press, and I'd be like, hey guys, I can take pictures as well. And so it was really just about like, I always tell people like, don't quit your day job. Like, it's not, oh, you can only be one or the other. Like, you need to be smart. You need to strategize and use every opportunity to gather information. You know, nobody just like, I mean, some people maybe, but for me, I definitely don't think without having any formal education in the creative world, I had to basically do my own creative university, which was basically working at various different jobs. Even if my role wasn't specifically being a creative, I was still soaking it up, still making myself known. Hey, I have these skills. Can I do this and that? Hey, I'll stay behind later and I'll take the photos, or send me to this gig and I'll give you some amazing photos. And eventually people started to realize that, oh, this person actually has a bunch of different skill sets. And I was actively building something outside of my job always that gave me that value as a creative. So that was really how I kind of started, was just like, I'm a serial like job person. I've literally done every job. Like, I've worked in retail, food, hotels, hospitality, like everything. And even those jobs that weren't industry jobs, I was still learning the skills that I still use today to run my own business and to actually like create this kind of work. I think like every opportunity is a learning experience, and it's really just about, I guess, figuring out, for me it was more about, in the creative industry, more about what do I want my work to do for people, rather than what exactly is the job I want to do. It was more like, what's my mission here? And my mission is, I want to empower Black and brown people in whatever way that I can. So that really could be me on the inside working at a label, actively choosing a Black photographer to shoot this artist and being that person that's pushing that for that person. But it also could be me being that Black photographer or brown photographer, and using my, you know, unique perspective and lens to capture somebody from my community who might not be captured in the same way by, you know, say a white cisgender male who probably doesn't understand that experience. So I think, yeah, my journey into the creative industries has definitely been through the corporate lens, but as a kind of, I call myself a bit of like a covert spy on the inside. Like, I've never been a corporate person, and I've always thought I will be working for myself one day. This is all just an information gathering kind of exercise. And now I'm at that point where I work for myself, and when I engage with those clients and I understand how the structure of the creative industry works, which is a really, really important lesson for anyone creative who's planning to work with brands to make their art. Because predominantly that has been how my art and expression, obviously I do have personal projects as well, but a lot of my work is working with brands, taking their money and using it to make something that is for us and for like my people, you know? So yeah.
Thank you. Antoinette, if if you're ready.
Yes. Oh, am I unmuted? Very cool. So I went the traditional route. Been doing art since childhood. I was, you know, I'm from New York, but I moved to Dominican Republic when I was like, what, 8, 9? And because the dollar is more substantial there, I was able to afford art classes, which I wouldn't have been able to if I was still in the States. So from there, okay, so my mom was like really into astrology. And so they read my chart and they knew I was going to do something artistic. So they pushed real hard for architecture or design. They really tried. And then I ended up going to school for graphic design. I hated every second of it. I changed my major like 2 years into studio art, and it's always felt more natural for me. Then like the traditional route that you work for an artist or you work at art related places. I worked at an art supply store. I worked for an artist, a sculptor for a while. And, you know, I was in between 10,000 jobs, and, you know, the way they tell you to go about your art practice is if you're not making anything, then it's kind of just chatter, you know what I mean? So the real experience is through making the stuff consistently or as much as you can, and then submitting it to shows, and then trying to get into shows and showing a lot. And then somehow through that, you're supposed to get a deal, get a gallery to represent you. At least that was the old school way. Now that's kind of, you know, not as popular, especially with like the internet. Then from there, I was always the person working 300 jobs. Like before the pandemic, I was teaching. So I was a sip and paint teacher for like 3 or 4 different places. And I was working myself to the bone. I worked in restaurants. I had a bunch of jobs, part-times at offices as an assistant. Then the pandemic hit. During that time, I was doing a residency, which for those who don't know, it's basically like an incubator where you can just work on your art, and sometimes they give you a goal. Like mine was to make something for a library in the community, and I had to give free classes to the community like once a month, or at least at a very, very low rate. And during that time, I got money, which was great because some residencies do not give you money. They just give you a studio space if you're lucky. I finally had some money, and I was able to buy an iPad. And then when the pandemic hit, I lost all of my jobs, and I was stuck at home, and I just made comic strips because, yeah, I was painting and wood burning and doing all that stuff, but it was really hard to get. It took a while. Like it was very labor intensive. I can't post every other day because there's only so much progress I can make in a few days when I'm doing everything by hand. And so that became like my surefire way to like just, you know, put them all out. And curious enough, when I was younger, I made comic strips all the time, like in grade school. So it's been a real full circle moment for me.
That's really nice to hear. Thank you. Saba, if you want to talk about your
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting because in terms of my childhood, I kind of grew up in a home which was, it was sort of filled with handwritten letters and ghazals and a bit of Shakespeare and a bit of everything in the mix, because my father was a professor of English literature. And so we kind of grew up consuming stuff like Charlotte's Web and just spending time at the British Council Library and those sorts of things, right? So the reason why I think that backstory is important is that somewhere I think the seeds of storytelling, agnostic to medium, whether it was film or the novel or an op-ed, were always there, because that was kind of what comprised our dining table conversations. Subsequently, you know, I was at Oxford, and it was really the first time I'd spent significant time outside of Pakistan. And as those of you who are in Oxford right now or have spent time there know that from every little nook and cranny, there's a little creative story bursting out, you know. And so to me, like when I first, this sounds so voyeuristic, but when I first heard like the musicians on the cobbled streets, I'm like, what is going on? Like I could have never imagined that. And today, obviously, it sounds like I'm exoticizing that, but all of those little things kind of somewhere kept that creative spark alive. But then, you know, there's a practical side to things. So when I got out of college, a family circumstance was such that I had to take up a corporate job. So I took up a job at Citibank. I thought I would hate it because fresh out of Oxford, I felt like, oh my God, like completely anti-corporate, let's get them kind of thing, you know. And so I was in that zone, but I realized I actually enjoyed the Citibank job a lot. I'm not going to pretend like I did. It was like a university in itself. And then, as much as I hate to say this, but I became a trailing partner. So we kind of moved geographies based on where my husband moved. And that's why we moved to Doha. And that's why we're in the UAE right now. But incidentally, it was here that I got the NYU job. And I think that was exciting because suddenly I felt like I was in an environment that allowed that side of me that was latently, I think, resting somewhere to kind of reemerge, you know, because again, it's like corridor conversations at NYU, very similar to Oxford, are always going to somewhere spark that creative energy and that spirit and kind of just reignite that soul, I think. And so I think it was really NYU where that restarted. And I think today when I think about the journey to storytelling, it takes me back to even our oral tradition, which is like just sitting around a campfire and telling a story, right? Like, so why is that important to me? And why does that drive me? I think it's because it allows you to forge a connection with other people, with human beings. And I think I crave that kind of connection, and in a strange way, I remember I spoke to Mohsin Hamid once. I was interviewing him. He's an author, he's a Pakistani author, for those who might not know. And he said, I mean, writing a book or telling a story is like an invitation to dance. It's like co-creation. It's not just like I write the book and I'm like, here, read it in the way that I meant to write it. And even today with like the film, the book, people will come and give me interpretations that I couldn't have ever imagined as I was trying to tell those stories. And I think that's the big reason why I moved to that. And I think somebody else said this as well about jobs seeming mechanical, and kind of, I think that was important for me as well. You get stuck in that 9 to 5. And when I reached NYU, I think some of those conversations made me realize, what am I doing for my eulogy? We're so caught up with this idea of the resume, about how do I sell myself on the marketplace. Those things are still important to me, don't get me wrong. But I think somewhere I felt like, am I going to be able to leave even the tiniest legacy? So I think intrinsically that's what motivated me. But then extrinsically, we've been talking so much about identity, about reclamation. I think reclamation from a South Asian context is so important to me. And as a storyteller, it gives me the power to say, like, the book, a lot of the book is based in Lahore, right? And as a storyteller, I always think, what vignettes of Pakistan do I want to show right now? And I think there's a really beautiful energy and a power in that, which is allowing me to introduce audiences, whether it's through film or whether it's through writing, to parts of my home country, which usually stay very well concealed. And I think it allows me to put Pakistan on the map for the right reasons, because every time I grew up thinking about Pakistan, even now, like, I've kind of stopped listening to the news a little bit, because there's always this sense of, you'll immediately think of the bearded terrorist or the ragged children kind of running through the streets, or of the veiled oppressed woman. And I think the creative spirit really allows me to explore the grays and to say, is there a Pakistani woman who's neither oppressed nor fast and vile, but she's regular and she's everyday and she's vulnerable and she's flawed, but her voice is ascendant? How do I show that woman? And I think it's through the power of storytelling. So I think in a nutshell, that's really what drove me to it.
Wow. I really enjoyed listening to that. Thank you. Phillippa, yeah, so how did you get into the creative industry?
Yeah, I've always been artistic, and my family is also very artistic. And then when I was 17, when I had to decide what to study, I wanted to study art, and my mom said, no, you don't make money as an artist. So I studied communication, and actually in the first year I dropped out. Yeah, so I started looking at other options. At that point, I didn't realize I didn't know I wanted to go into film, and I always felt a desire to express myself. So I wasn't sure if it was literature I wanted to study, or psychology I wanted to explore, or painting. And then, yeah, I finally realized I'd always been interested in film, but I didn't think it was so easy to become a filmmaker. Anyhow, I ended up pursuing a BA in film, in script writing and directing. And then I graduated. I studied in Cape Town, South Africa. And then I was looking for jobs, looking for funding. I wasn't able to get any. And the laws there in terms of working are very complicated. Anyhow, so I started making my own film. Like, I managed to get a secondhand camera. I started making a documentary on somebody. And I guess since then, I've always been making my own stuff and freelancing on the side. And I mean, I don't know what the other ladies have to say, but it's being an artist is complicated in terms of sustaining yourself, in terms of keeping your staying courageous, keeping your self-esteem up, staying on it. You receive so many rejection letters. It can be really tough, and your family, you have to believe in yourself, and sometimes I think the people around you who care about you can sometimes worry about you, to be honest. But back to how I got into what I've been doing. I found that the times that were most challenging, and I often needed, I'd applied for funding, but I hadn't got it. Those were the times when my art actually really developed, and I really found my voice. Because often there was a film I was making called New Moon that took me 8 years to make. It was a really challenging experience. And towards the end, when I needed to edit the film, I didn't have any more funding, and I'd been applying to everything, and I was crying. Anyhow, I had to finish the film, and I had hoped to work with other people, to pay different people, etc. But I couldn't, so I ended up doing a lot of it myself. And I luckily had an editor who I consider a collaborator, who gave me a really good rate, so we worked on it together. But what I mean to say is, at that time, I suddenly said, okay, I'm not making the film. There's nobody who's giving me money to make this film. I need to make this film for myself. And that means that I completely own it. And somehow by me owning it and being like, F it, sorry to swear, but like F this, it allowed me to just tell the film that I wanted to see, as opposed to trying to please other people or make a film that I thought other people wanted to see. So then I suddenly thought, okay, I've got all these photographs that I've taken. Let me put the photographs in. I have it's my voice in the film. I'm like, okay, just speak my truth in the film. So there's just a mixture of lots of stuff that kind of have a collage type effect. But in the end, when you start to see my work, you start to say, oh, that's Phillippa's work. And like this short film Seeds that I talked about, that I mentioned earlier, that Khadijah had seen, that we made with no money. I was with the editor and I said, listen, I've got this poem, let's just try do something together. And that film had no budget whatsoever, and I just recorded the voice on my iPhone. And so the point is, I think like what a lot of the panelists are saying is that, and also which a friend of mine told me, who was a musician, who's a very famous Kenyan musician, he said, when you're passionate about something, music, whatever it is, you'll do it if nobody pays you. You'll be doing it at home people will find you doing it. And that's it, because you're passionate about it. You're almost, obsessed is a strong word, but you're doing it. So you just have to keep pouring your love, keep pouring your spirit, everything into it, because it's an exploration and it's a form of expression, and the people that will resonate with it will do that, whenever that is. Yeah.
Thank you. You mentioned Seeds again. I wanted to ask you, with Seeds, because it's for people who haven't seen it, it's a poem, but then it's also a video. So you mentioned that you've used your photos for it. You also mentioned that you were like, oh, I need something else to go alongside this. Like, what inspired that? Because the poem itself is fantastic, and I think the photos really add something, but then you wouldn't necessarily, it was kind of like you had a thought after that, oh, it needs something else. So what encouraged you to do that?
Okay, so number one was I was editing this long film, and I was also very depressed, and I just needed something to focus on. So I told Angie, the editor, let's just make something small with whatever was left over from the film. And this poem that I'd written 2 years ago, it just felt like it was still alive. It wasn't closed. And sometimes with the way that I work, maybe other ladies are like this, but I guess the way I tend to work is sometimes I can see a line of like a sentence, and then maybe even a week later, an image will come. And then from that image, I can start to hear a sound. And then that sound will take me to another sound. So suddenly this trail begins to form. And also, I think even years before, I'd learned about how turtles never meet their mother. and they always come back to the same beach where they were born, like 15, 12 years later, to have their own eggs, to hatch their own eggs. So there was just certain things that kept floating around in my head, and I thought, oh, like, what if I use some of my sea images and put images of people and children, and find a way of interweaving and interrelating the fact that some people in families can have situations where they don't meet their mothers, or they're not connected to their family for whatever reason. I mean, I'm rambling, but yeah, it's just going with intuition. One thing will tell me something else, and
That's very interesting. I think.
Yes, can I
go
butt in?
ahead.
So, and a bit like Hussina, most like that film, no budget. A lot of my films, no budget. So we didn't have any money for score. So, and you have a sound library that's free, but it's gangster. It sounds terrible. So Angie, the editor, got the sound of a gramophone and put it in there. There's another film I made. We didn't have budget, so I looked for the sound of one of these shells that you can blow into. And that was the only sound that we had. So there's all these different ways you just can be resourceful, but you have to just follow your heart and trust it. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. But yeah, it's very nice to hear like from you guys and see how, yeah, being like resourceful and how you still manage to make something that you're like proud of despite not getting funding maybe. Yeah, thank you. I want to move on. Philippa sort of touched on this. I want to move on to like any challenges or like setbacks you might have faced being in the creative industry. Yeah, so whether that be like funding issues, or just like creative process issues, things like that. Yeah, so Hasina, I'll start off with you.
Before I get onto the challenges, I just wanted to say there's so much that resonates with what all of my fellow artists have said, and particular Philippa about the budget, which is kind of part of this question with challenges. It's like, sometimes you hear people say, when you're a creative or you're an artist or something, sometimes you can sieve through people who want to do it for certain reasons, or you gain to learn as you're making your work what kind of artist you are. It's like, regardless of whether the money is there or regardless of whether the collaborators are there, if you have something to say, you will do it. It's like you won't stop until you do it, even if that takes time, years, months, I don't know, days, and it just over time it manifests and you will make it. So I think for myself, when it comes to challenges, sometimes the challenges or the barriers, for example, I face, so let's say funding is one of them. Even if I'm working all of the day jobs the other ladies have mentioned, because you do that no one teaches you how to be an artist. No one teaches you that they might teach you the business aspect of it or the marketing aspect of it, but no one talks about the mental health ramifications or like the basic survival, especially if you're living in a major city like London or New York or wherever it is, because rent is such a thing. So if you're lucky enough to be privileged to have a financial stability, to I don't know, own your own place or have family that can support you in that way, that makes some of those barriers easier. But that doesn't mean that you don't have your own challenges. For example, what is it that you strive? What's the stories you strive to tell? What are the, what is the kind of work you're making? Who are you making it for? I think the biggest challenge has been for me is to get rid of like this imposter syndrome of believing that I can't make the work, and realizing you don't need permission to do it. If you have a story to tell, you tell that story, even if it's on your mobile phone. The last couple of films that I have made are opening in festivals over the next 2 months. Both of those films were made on no budget. The amount of time, sweat, and tears I put into those films like exhausted me in the dark depths of the pandemic. I was sat in Berlin and I was making this work. And the reason I moved to Berlin was because it was cheaper than living in London for those 6 months. And I had to learn how to edit. I had to learn how to use Adobe Premiere. Often I've got collaborators and friends who are filmmakers and camera people. I had to do that. I had to make a lot of mistakes. And I think the challenges can also be massive learning curves. If you can't do something, you're just going to have to learn it. Like, you're going to have to go on YouTube and you're going to have to do it. It's going to take you so much longer. But it's also not being afraid to make mistakes. because when you do it for yourself and there is no budget, there are no funders, there is no one who wants to associate or affiliate their name to your project and kind of have it, shape it a particular way or demand a particular outcome. There is a lot of freedom in doing stuff on a low to no budget. And when you're doing all of those hundreds of jobs, I found the freedom I got, even if I was broke and really exhausted, was that it was my project. It was all my creativity that I was putting into it. Of course, the challenges you have are like, because I'm making a lot of work about dual identity, looking at, you know, the South Asian diaspora, but as well as, you know, other communities, sometimes you can get pigeonholed to be an artist making work just about that. And you may have loads of different ideas. You may want to do stuff which they might not think is relevant or related or associated to your community or your, you know, your background or your ethnicity. Just because I'm an artist, I'm not just an artist making work about being South Asian or being you know, the child of migrants, whatever. Like, there are loads of other things. Maybe I want to tell stories about trees, you know, like, who knows? But it's about creating your own trajectory. And another challenge is to yeah, just to quieten those voices in your head that tell you what you're doing is crap, or who's going to want to look at it, and not being afraid to ask for help. I know practically in terms of challenges, I think funding is a massive thing, and also gatekeepers who allows you to make work. It's because we live in a world of the advancement of modern technology and stuff, you can easily put your own work out there and find a way of creating an audience for it without those big people who are, you know, centralizing a lot of things, or gatekeepers. I'm sure there's loads of other things, but yeah, hopefully that makes some sense.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Nina?
Yeah, I think honestly, just piggybacking off of that last point, I totally agree. I think that the gatekeepers and navigating an industry that has for years historically tried to push people like us out is one of my biggest challenges. I think that so much of what I do, people don't see behind the scenes, is me advocating and fighting for and trying to get people to understand that these stories need to be told and that it's important, that they deserve funding, that they deserve attention, that they deserve resources. That's one of the biggest challenges that I face, is just like basically having to explain over and over and over again that our stories matter, and having to constantly be motivated to put up that fight and use the position that I'm in. Even, you know, going back to when I worked, like when I had a full-time job and I was working at a label, even then I was still behind the scenes advocating for why, you know, why we should be doing, even if I was doing like social media, like we should be recognizing Black History Month. What's our programming around like Black lives and brown stories throughout the rest of the year? Like, we can't just keep doing these things because it's novelty or because it's trendy, and trying to basically create some sustainability about how brands engage with Black and brown artists has sort of been my uphill battle throughout my career, from being on the inside to now being on the outside, being recognized as a creative and now being asked by brands like Nike, for example, to come back in and consult for them and tell them how to like make cool shit. That's always a battle of like trying to navigate, like I can't remember who just said it, about just when you don't have funding and versus when you do, just how many people then have a stake in what you're making and try to shape what you're making and have their own goals and intentions for the outcome, the creative thing. And having to balance that, knowing when to pick your battles, knowing when to stand up and say, no, I will not do this, or we cannot do this, or, you know, pushing back has been such a big challenge. And the other thing I would say is, as a director, one of my biggest challenges is dealing with people who are not used to taking direction from somebody that looks like me. Like, I'm the boss. Like, it's my show, it's my thing, I'm directing this thing, and getting people to actually respect that voice and respect me in a way where I don't have to raise my voice and I don't have to emulate or be that aggressive stereotype that people try and put me into. Like being a creative leader is something that a lot of these white men, they're not used to. They're older, they have a different set of ideals, and a young woman in her 20s telling them what to do, they're not used to it. And it definitely causes friction. And it's one of the things that I deal with on a regular basis, having to chin check people and be like, yo, this is actually my thing and you work for me. So either we're going to do it this way or we're not. And that's taken a long journey to be able to feel confident enough to actually stand by my ideas and not let people with more experience try and, you know, cast those seeds of doubt. And just trying to always remember, like, I'm here for a reason. I've been chosen to do this for a reason. And now I can't just back down at the first person that tells me, well, we don't usually do it like that. Well, maybe that's the point, you know? And I think like that's definitely been one of the bigger challenges. And as my work continues to grow, the types of clients I'm working with, the types of art I'm making gets bigger and bigger in scale, I realize that it's never going to stop. Actually, it's going to get more hard as I sort of ascend to this next level of like bigger budgets to make stuff. You know, when I started, it's like, oh, I can't wait till I can get like a proper budget to just make this thing. And now with that money comes all of these extra conditions and challenges and stakeholders and things that, you know, make the process definitely harder. But that's why, you know, I'm so grateful for community. And that's why I'm so grateful for having other friends and peers who are also alongside me on this journey. And we're all building. Everybody I know is doing something amazing. And I think that's like always my reminder of like, oh no, we're on the right track. And actually, if we are making people feel uncomfortable, especially in this year, you know, how many people have said, oh, we've had a really difficult year, you know, with George Floyd. Obviously, this year or 2020 has made a lot of people suddenly magically realize that racism exists, but this is not something new for most of us who have been creating and doing this work for a long time. And so this new interest has brought a lot of new challenges as well. I would say this new, suddenly everybody, I mean, I remember this time last year, my inbox was like out of control. Suddenly everybody, all these people who I've been pitching to, nobody pays any attention. All of a sudden in my inbox, yeah, we'd love to make this thing. We'd love to do that thing. So it's also challenging for your self-confidence as an artist to, you know, be a novelty to so many people, to be given the space and the attention when it serves a more performative kind of purpose for other people. And it's really difficult to kind of keep that morale that there is value in the work that you're doing, whether or not these gatekeepers are paying attention to it, you know? And I think that's something I still struggle with, of like, just trying to navigate this space where there's just still, so it's changing, but there's still so few of us. It's hard sometimes because you just think like, so wait a second, like you're only approaching me because of this. Is it because I'm actually good at what I'm doing, or is it because I'm ticking your diversity box, you know? And I deal with that on a regular basis. Like all of a sudden this brand wants to do something and it's Black History Month, or it's Juneteenth, or it's this, or it's that, or whatever. But where are they in between, right? And like for me as well, being someone who's mixed, I think that I also struggle. One of my biggest challenges, I think, in the most recent sense, as far as identity, has been about just also the space that I'm taking up as a mixed race woman within I guess the way that the clients and the brands see me as a Black woman, when I'm also an Indian woman too. I'm half Indian and I'm half African. And I find it very interesting how brands gravitate to certain parts of my identity to kind of fulfill whatever diversity checkbox they're trying to tick. Even with the show I'm making at the moment, right? It's all about conversations for Black women, right? and I am obviously partially Black, but I do not have the same experience as a African American woman, for example. And that also plays on my mind, like this privilege, I think Saba talked about passport privilege, right? And like, I've made work in South Africa, I've made work in India, in Ghana, all the places that I have community in, but it's not lost on me as well, of like the privilege I have with that pink passport, or a burgundy passport that I have, that British passport, what that does for me as a creative, what my British accent does for me here in the US, how when I was back in England, people weren't paying attention, but now all of a sudden I'm here and they're knocking on my door like, oh, wow, you're so amazing. And I'm like, but the work hasn't changed. So that will continue to be a struggle, I think, as I continue to go in my career, as I move to LA at the end of this year and start my journey in film and TV. I already anticipate that, I'm going to have to navigate moments where I might feel like I'm taking up space. I might feel like I need to I might feel like I'm being used by corporations or by, other stakeholders in my creativity. So I think that that's always, and it's probably going to always be an ongoing struggle that I will deal with as an artist who is basically from so many places. But it's definitely one that's like an ongoing thing that I notice more and more. And I think really it's just about just finding, again, like I said, that community that grounds me and makes me realize, I am valid, my story is valid, and what I have to say is for a reason. And just keeping that sense of value without the external gatekeepers placing it upon you, I think is really, really important.
Thank you. I think that's also like the reason why we chose to do like a full panel of like women of color, just to amplify those voices that aren't very much heard in the creative industry. And to celebrate like people that we don't see often. But Antoinette, if you want to go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so biggest setbacks, I'm gonna go ahead and say, since a lot of the people here are in college, academia is very racist, okay? What they teach you in school, having to hear that your like African art is primitive, that it's, subcultures, etc. You're gonna hear it all the time. It's gonna get very annoying. I spent a lot of time in college arguing. And then you're gonna find that your own people will not be for you. So there was something Mahaneela had said earlier that really like ticked an old memory, and I was like, ah. So I'm gonna talk about it here. So I was doing my BFA, and there's a senior seminar that you do in your last semester, like so they can teach you how to be an artist or something. And so I did a series of pieces, and I wrote, because you're supposed to write an artist's bio and a statement, right? And all the paintings were Black women mixed with like wood burning and stuff, and they're all really pretty, very aesthetically pleasing. But the artist statement was kind of what I've spoken about here, wanting representation and seeing everyday women and stuff like that. And there was a TA who found it very political, yet the work that I was portraying was very pretty. The teacher themselves was Dominican like me, and like, she looked, South Asian, because Dominicans look like a lot of things. Stayed quiet the whole time. The TA rips one into me like, it's a 4-hour class and you're supposed to be talking about like 2 other people. Mine took up the entire session. So what Mahaneela was saying about, your thing provoking a lot of questions and a lot of critiques is because you're doing something they probably don't understand. And I had to explain to this white lady how, what she was saying wasn't right, and that what I'm making is very political, because even this space, us being able to talk, is very political because we don't usually have the mic. And, usually my friends would help, but they were all high because they got high after they like helped me set up my show. And yeah, that stuck with me a lot, because there's going to be a time where people do not understand the work that you're doing or why you do it, and then choosing whether or not you want to continue. And no lie, I definitely cried after that. You know what I mean? Because it's like, you really feel like you're on your own. And, my colleagues could not help me at that time, but it was like me. And then you're expecting like backup from someone who looks like you, who is part of your community. You might not get it. You probably won't. Yeah. And then the other thing was basically people aren't going to understand. And if you really are creating something that, because I also don't want to condone someone making something very offensive and then being like, well, they don't understand. Antoinette said that must mean it's good art. I didn't say that. So then the other thing was pigeonholing, which everyone brought up. But yeah, like December, November, you know, my Instagram blew up like in June, like everyone else's. But why is my inbox full only for, you know, Juneteenth? I already started getting the emails. Black History Month, full. Everyone wants to know about me. I make other work, but that's not important. There's a quota to be fixed. And then there's the privilege of who gets to tell the stories. Because yeah, I'm light skinned. And I think that that has given me a lot of privilege and a lot of spaces. Even when I was the only Black person, all of the other people of color, yeah, I said what I said, were white. Like they could be Hispanic, but they were white Hispanics. And then, you know, so what that does in the art community and who gets to tell all these stories, you'll see, and they're usually light skinned. And so knowing when to toe the line for that and who to let, you know, like double dutch, who's gonna get in, like, you know, balancing that act, because knowing that, you know, I am where I am, I know it's because of the way I look. I know it. And my hair texture, all of that comes into play. So, you know, knowing your spot, your privilege in the spaces that you inhabit, and who can you assist. And, you know, in the words of Saba, it was kind of like, who can you assist without seeming like a savior? Because, you know, yeah, it's not your job, but it is your right and your duty to help people who are like you, who are not being heard. That's all.
I love that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Saba, we are running a bit out of time, but Saba, do you want to go ahead with, any challenges or setbacks?
I'll try and keep it brief. I think there's a couple of things, right? So as a woman of color, I would say you're battling entitlement, right? A lot of the times in so many different contexts, in so many different spaces. And I think what I mean is I'm constantly battling other people's entitlement over me. And at a really fundamental level, it's their entitlement to tell me how to think. And as a result of that, one of the things that I grew up doing was I learned how to self-censor. And I touched upon this a little bit earlier, but it was to say there are some things that in a place like Pakistan will only be spoken of in whispers. Those are things like religious dogma, like women's sexuality, a lot of things actually around women. And so for me as a storyteller, I think I would be insincere if I didn't own up to the fact that even today, when I'm putting out things around women's sexuality, when I'm putting out this Me Too in South Asia thing, when I'm even something maybe that seems as basic as an intimate scene in the novel, there are thoughts racing through my mind that will always make me think, there's going to be a group of people, maybe even within my own extended network, that's going to cast me a troublemaker for actually doing that sort of thing, or it's going to cast some kind of judgment against me because, hey, she wrote a scene like that, or she related a scene like that in the film, right? And so that's something I still remember with the novel, and I wish I had it right now to show you the cover, but with the cover, one of the first things I got on Instagram was somebody who I obviously didn't know, but who said, can you please pull that image down because it's Allah written backwards and it's really blasphemous. And I thought, so I think it's kind of one of the challenges you always face is like, what kind of pushback are you going to get? And it can take so many forms. We've always seen like a film or a book can take like the form of a ban in a country like Pakistan. I've got family back home. There's obviously things like trolling. It's so many different shapes and forms. So I just want to be honest to say that those are apprehensions that do cross my mind. But then I think when you eventually put, your book or your film out in the universe or whatever it is, your visual art, then you are crossing that mental barrier and that hurdle. And so today, I think what drives me is, what are the silences that I'm seeing in literature and in art that I now want to unpack despite some of the pushback that I might get? So I think that's one of the challenges. The other thing is also when I'm handling a sensitive topic, like something like Me Too, how do I do that? Because I'm going beyond my comfort zone in a sense. How do I build trust and rapport so that people will open up to me? And yet in a way that doesn't make it seem like I'm cashing in or milking someone's story, so that I can get an official selection somewhere at a festival. So I think, and people spoke about tokenistic kind of window dressing diversity, and I think that's such a big problem. And so I'm not going to dwell on it because we've spoken about it already. Other panelists have spoken about it, but I think for me, the big kind of question today is, when I want to show a place like Pakistan, or when I want to talk about female desire, how do I show audiences that things can be broken yet beautiful? And so part of that is becoming comfortable with the chaos and the messiness and the ambiguity, and saying, well, this is just how real places and real people are, And I think this goes back to what one of the other panelists said about, there are certain tropes you get caught within, like especially in publishing, there is so much of this. What kind of story by a woman of Pakistani origin will be picked up by a big publishing house? Is it about terrorism? Is it about the oppressed woman? I had so many rounds with Bloomsbury to say, I don't want that oppressed looking woman on my cover. She can have her head covered as she does on the book today, but she's got agency, and the book is about about her trying to reclaim agency in contexts where we think there is none. So I'm really wary of not trying to play to that Western gallery and that trope, whilst talking about issues that are close to my heart. So women and terrorism and dogma, those are things that are part of my everyday embodied reality. They will make their way into my storytelling. But how do I do that without really trying to jump onto a bandwagon? I think those are some of the challenges that I'm still grappling with.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Phillippa, if you want to go ahead with, like challenges and setbacks you faced.
Very interesting what's being said. Thank you, everyone. I'll say it's everything that everyone has said before me. And yeah, I think all of that, and sometimes you can have days where or at least I'll speak for myself, I have days when I have my doubts. But I guess I'll also speak for the moment. In the moment, I have my faith, and I trust that things will work out in the ways that I want and in the timing that is right. I also have my passion. So if I can do more work, like if I've got time, okay, can I do more work on this? Sure. Can I develop this more? Sure. So I just kind of try and stay in the moment, and not get caught up in the challenges that I may be feeling about the future, or if I can actually create the work. If I can create it now, I'll do my best to do that. And I also have found that sometimes, I'll be creating stuff and I'll wonder who will be interested in it. And I do try and create it for myself, but I also believe that the more that we push the envelope and create things that we don't really see right now, I mean, the world is hungry. There are people like us or people like you that are all, scattered across the globe, feeling like aliens and feeling like alone, who are wondering, what the hell am I doing here on planet Earth, And they're crying out to feel like there are other people like them who see things in the same way, who face the same challenges, who also want the same answers. So I just trust that as we're moving forward and more people are more hungry and curious about creating new systems and new ways of thinking, that eventually whatever we all create will find an audience, because we're tired of the majority of the stories that have already existed. So yeah.
Thank you for that. All of your, everyone's like inputs and views have been really interesting. I'm aware that we're quite over time and I don't want to keep you guys for too long. So yeah, the whole talk has been recorded for anybody who wants to find it afterwards. But thank you everyone for joining. I hope people found it interesting. But yeah, I'll end it here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
This was so great. Great conversation.
We're really ending it?
Okay. If you guys,
I think we needed it. I think the panelists needed it.
Yeah. This was really great. I learned a lot. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you, and really nice meeting all of you guys. I'm gonna look you up.
Yeah, I know. Can you send us like everybody's websites,
Yeah.
social medias, etc.?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be good. You guys.
I'll email all that to you guys. It's for anybody else who's interested. It's all on like the New College Arts Week page, so you can find everybody's details there as well. But yeah, thank you everyone. This was fantastic, and hopefully, yeah, everybody learned something. Yeah, thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Everyone in the comments, you're welcome and thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you, you too.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Welcome. All right.